I'm Rebecca Martinez, 29 years old, and I watched my parents drain what they believed was my entire trust fund last October, $430,000 that I'd supposedly inherited from my grandmother and carefully invested over 7 years. They thought they were saving my sister Sofia's dream wedding, their precious daughter, who had never been denied anything in her life. What they didn't know was that every account they accessed was fake. Every dollar was an illusion. I'd spent 3 years setting this elaborate trap, knowing exactly what they would do when desperation met opportunity. Before I tell you how I caught my parents red-handed and exposed decades of favoritism, let me know where you're watching from. Hit subscribe if you've ever dealt with family members who treat you like a backup plan while your sibling gets everything handed to them. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Growing up in Coral Gables, Florida meant living in a world where appearances mattered more than authenticity. Our Spanish-style villa, with its clay tile roof and manicured gardens, projected the perfect image to our wealthy neighbors. My father Miguel ran a successful real estate development company, and my mother Carmen hosted charity galas that regularly made the society pages. From the outside, we were the epitome of successful Latin American immigrants living the American dream. Inside our home was a different reality entirely. My earliest memories center around one unshakable truth. Sofia was the princess, and I was the supporting cast member in her story. 3 years younger than me, Sofia learned early that tears, tantrums, or simply batting her eyelashes could get her anything she desired. My parents reinforced this dynamic at every opportunity. "Rebecca, let Sofia wear your quinceañera dress for her school play," my mother would say when I was 15, despite the dress being a custom creation my grandmother had saved months to buy specifically for my celebration. "But Mommy, it's mine," I'd protest, knowing already that my objection was futile. "Don't be selfish, Mija. She needs to look perfect for her performance." The dress was altered to fit Sofia's smaller frame, ruining it for any future use. When Sofia inevitably spilled stage makeup on the delicate fabric, I received a lecture about sharing while she received comfort for being so upset about the accident. This pattern defined our childhood. When I was 17 and had saved $800 for my job at a local bookstore to buy a laptop for college applications, my parents borrowed it to fund Sofia's spring break trip to Cancun with her friends. "She's been working so hard at school," my father explained, ignoring the fact that Sofia's grades were mediocre at best while I maintained a 4.0 GPA. "She deserves this vacation." When I pointed out that I needed the laptop for my college essays, he waved dismissively. "You're resourceful, Rebecca. You'll figure something out." I did figure it out, writing my essays by hand and typing them on computers at the public library during their limited hours. I was accepted to Duke University with a partial scholarship, an achievement that earned exactly 30 seconds of acknowledgement before the conversation shifted to Sofia's upcoming junior prom and how much her dress was going to cost. The most devastating blow came just before my freshman year at Duke. My grandmother, Abuela Elena, had established education funds for both Sofia and me before her death, when I was 12. I'd built my entire college plan around that money, choosing Duke partly because the combination of my scholarship and the trust fund would make it affordable. 2 weeks before move-in day, my parents called me into the living room. The mahogany coffee table was covered with financial documents, and my father's expression was grimmer than I'd ever seen it. "Rebecca, we need to discuss your college funding," he said, removing his reading glasses to clean them, a nervous habit he'd had for as long as I could remember. "What about it?" "I leave for Durham in 2 weeks," I replied, though something in their demeanor already had my stomach dropping. My mother twisted her diamond engagement ring. "Another nervous tell. We've had to make some adjustments to your trust fund." Those adjustments meant my entire inheritance had been used to send Sofia to a prestigious private arts academy in California, supposedly to nurture her exceptional talent in theater. In reality, it was an expensive boarding school for wealthy kids who couldn't maintain grades or behavior standards in regular schools. But what about Duke? My voice cracked despite my efforts to stay composed. "You've always been so independent," my father said, as if independence was a character flaw. "You can take out loans, apply for more scholarships, Maybe start at community college for a year or two. My mother nodded earnestly. You always figure things out, Mija. Sofia needs more guidance, more support. This academy could really launch her career. That night crystallized everything for me. I wasn't just less favored. I was expected to sacrifice my future for Sofia's whims. Something hardened inside me that evening, a cold determination that would shape the next decade of my life. I did figure it out, but it came at enormous personal cost. I deferred admission for a year, worked 3 jobs to save money, and took out the maximum student loans available. I graduated from Duke with a degree in finance and economics, working part-time throughout college while maintaining a 3.8 GPA. Every achievement was met with polite disinterest from my parents, quickly overshadowed by Sofia's latest drama or supposed breakthrough. That's wonderful, Rebecca, my mother would say when I called to share good news. Did we tell you Sofia booked a commercial? It's just a local car dealership, but her agent says it could lead to bigger things. After graduation, I moved to Atlanta and secured a position at Southeastern Investment Partners. The distance from Miami was intentional. I needed space to build my life without the constant emotional drain of my family's dynamics. My analytical mind and relentless work ethic served me well in the financial sector. I lived modestly despite my growing income, investing carefully and building genuine wealth while my family assumed I was struggling to pay off student loans. The family visits followed predictable patterns. My mother would inspect my modest apartment, making suggestions for improvements I couldn't afford according to their assumptions about my financial situation. My father would probe about my salary and career prospects with barely concealed concern about my ability to eventually contribute to family needs. Sofia, when she bothered to visit, would complain about whatever acting coach or agent had failed to recognize her obvious talent. Always someone else's fault, never hers. These visits inevitably culminated in discussions about family obligations and how successful families support each other. You know, Rebecca, my mother said during one visit 3 years ago, Sofia is really struggling with her credit card debt from that acting workshop in New York. We thought since you're doing well now. I'd heard variations of this conversation enough times to predict every beat. My responsibility to the family meant subsidizing Sofia's irresponsibility. When I refused, I was selfish, cold, ungrateful for everything they'd sacrificed for me. Family helps family was my mother's constant refrain, though the help only seemed to flow in one direction. As my real savings and investments grew substantially, so did their interest in my finances. Each conversation became more probing, each visit more focused on what I supposedly had and what Sofia supposedly needed. The resentment I'd carried since childhood evolved into something more calculated, suspicion, and eventually certainty about what they would do given the right opportunity. That's when the idea first formed. Not just to protect my assets, but to expose the truth about our family dynamic once and for all. If they were willing to steal from me, I needed to know, and I needed proof that would make denial impossible. By my 27th birthday, I'd established myself as a rising star at Southeastern Investment Partners. My client portfolio had grown significantly, and I developed a reputation for strategic thinking and risk assessment. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd learned to anticipate worst-case scenarios from a lifetime of watching my parents prioritize Sofia's wants over my needs. My actual financial situation was solid. 8 years of disciplined saving and strategic investing had built a portfolio worth substantially more than the $430,000 I would eventually use as bait. The real accounts were diversified across multiple institutions with security measures far beyond what most people implement. This wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Creating the illusion began with establishing digital footprints for accounts that existed only on paper. I started by opening legitimate accounts at banks different from my primary institutions, depositing minimal amounts to activate them. Then came the meticulous work of generating falsified statements, careful to include watermarks, account numbers, and fine print that would make them appear authentic. The psychology of deception relies heavily on believable details. People trust documents that look official, especially when they contain specific information that seems too elaborate to fabricate. I applied this principle religiously, creating fake statements that included transaction histories with recognizable vendors, regular deposits matching my known salary, and the gradual growth pattern someone would expect from a 7-year investment strategy. I manufactured an investment portfolio showing holdings in familiar companies, Tesla, Amazon, Apple, with performance metrics that mirrored actual market behavior for the time frame. The total across all accounts, exactly $430,000, supposedly inherited from my grandmother and grown through careful investing. For 9 months, I dropped subtle references during family calls and visits. This market volatility has me checking my portfolios constantly, I mentioned casually during a Sunday phone call with my mother. Portfolios? Multiple? She asked, interest immediately peaking. Just diversifying the inheritance from Abuela Elena, I replied, setting the hook. Nothing too aggressive, but it's grown nicely over the years. During a rare visit home for my father's birthday, I carefully staged my laptop to display a spreadsheet showing account summaries and balances. Looks like you're doing quite well for yourself, my father commented, lingering by my computer. I closed the laptop with practiced nonchalance, just trying to honor Abuela's memory by being responsible with what she left me. The spreadsheet had shown the combined total of approximately $430,000, a significant sum, but not so outlandish as to trigger immediate suspicion for someone at my professional level who'd been investing inheritance money for 7 years. Meanwhile, Sofia's latest crisis was unfolding with characteristic drama. After years of failed auditions and rejected headshots, she'd convinced herself that the problem wasn't her limited talent, but her lack of proper industry connections. She'd enrolled in an expensive, elite networking intensive in Los Angeles, complete with professional coaching, image consulting, and guaranteed meetings with casting directors. The program cost $50,000 upfront, with additional fees for headshots, demo reels, and networking events. My parents had co-signed loans to fund Sofia's Hollywood dreams, believing her dramatic claims about guaranteed opportunities and industry insiders. 6 months later, the promised connections had materialized into nothing more than expensive cocktail parties with other aspiring actors. Sofia's demo reel remained unwatched by anyone of consequence, and her professionally shot headshots joined thousands of others in casting directors' trash bins. The debt remained, now demanding payment from my parents as co-signers. The timing couldn't have been more perfect for my purposes. My supposed savings milestone had been established in their minds just as a massive family financial emergency materialized. I noticed subtle changes in my parents' behavior. My mother called more frequently, asking detailed questions about my life in Atlanta. My father began sending articles about tax benefits of family gifts and the importance of helping relatives during financial difficulties. We should really visit you soon, my mother suggested during a call in September. It's been too long since we've seen your place. That would be nice, I replied, knowing they hadn't shown interest in visiting Atlanta in the 3 years I'd lived there. The weekend they suggested happened to coincide with a genuine business conference in San Francisco I was scheduled to attend. I mentioned this, watching through video chat, as disappointment registered on my mother's face. But I'll be doing a portfolio rebalancing before I leave, I added casually. Might be hard to reach for a day or two while everything transfers between accounts. Portfolio rebalancing? My father's voice came from off-camera. Just moving some investments around for better returns. The bank recommended doing it while I can monitor the process in case there are any technical issues. I could practically see the mental calculations happening behind their eyes. The trap was almost ready. I installed discrete security cameras in my apartment, focusing particularly on my home office. I created convincing, but entirely fake online banking portals that would record access attempts. The passwords I used for these decoy accounts were intentionally vulnerable, variations of my birthday, my childhood address, and our family cat's name, things my parents might guess if they went looking. Most importantly, I established a tracking system that would document any attempted transfers from these fictitious accounts. If money was moved, I would know exactly when, where, and how much. The night before leaving for San Francisco, I called my parents, just checking in before my trip. I'll be mostly offline once I start this portfolio rebalancing tomorrow afternoon. Do you need someone to check on your apartment while you're gone? My mother asked, too casually. I smiled to myself. No need. I have a neighbor who has my spare key for emergencies. Well, if anything needs to be checked, your father and I could drive up from Miami, she offered. Thanks, but everything's set. I'll call when I get back Sunday night. As I packed for San Francisco, I deliberately left financial folders labeled investment summaries and trust fund portfolio visible on my desk. Inside were the carefully crafted statements showing my fictitious wealth. In the top drawer, I placed a handwritten note with account access information, including the vulnerable passwords. The trap was set. All that remained was to see if they would take the bait. The Financial Technology Conference in San Francisco provided perfect cover. I delivered my presentation on risk assessment in digital asset management Friday morning, networking with colleagues throughout the afternoon. No one would find it strange that I was particularly interested in security breach detection. It was literally my area of expertise. While maintaining a professional presence at the conference, I monitored the security feed from my apartment on my tablet during breaks. Friday passed without incident. Saturday morning, I participated in a panel discussion on family wealth management, my phone silenced but visible on the table. At 2:43 p.m., the security alert flashed on my screen, motion detected in my apartment. Excusing myself from the post-panel networking session, I found a quiet corner in the hotel lobby and opened the security app. The footage showed my parents entering my apartment using the spare key I'd given them years ago for emergencies. I feel sick about this, my mother said, glancing around nervously as they entered. My father's response was immediate and telling. We're just checking on things while she's away. She'd want us to make sure everything's secure during this portfolio transfer she mentioned. They moved with purpose toward my home office, not bothering to check the kitchen or bathroom, areas one would typically inspect if genuinely concerned about apartment security. In my office, my father immediately went to my desk while my mother stood watch at the door. Miguel, hurry, she urged. What if she has security cameras or something? She doesn't, he replied confidently. I checked the exterior when we arrived. Besides, she's in San Francisco until tomorrow evening. I watched as he methodically opened drawers, quickly finding the folder of financial statements. His expression changed as he reviewed the documents, eyebrows raising, a slow smile forming at the corners of his mouth. Carmen, look at this, he called softly. Our Rebecca has been quite the investor. My mother abandoned her post at the door, coming to look over his shoulder. Is that over $400,000? How is that possible? She's always been brilliant with money. He continued searching, finding the handwritten note with account access information. And she inherited from Mama, Elena, 7 years ago. This could solve everything with Sofia's situation. But we can't just take it, my mother protested weakly. It's her money. My father's justification came quickly and predictably. We're not taking it. We're borrowing it to save this family from financial ruin. Once Sofia gets established and starts booking roles, we'll replace every penny. Rebecca has always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her sister to suffer when she has the means to help. She's refused to help Sofia before, my mother reminded him, because she didn't understand the severity of the situation. This is different. The loan companies are threatening to come after our house because we co-signed. What would happen to family gatherings? Where would everyone come for holidays? Rebecca wouldn't want that. I watched their moral reasoning deteriorate in real time. It was fascinating in a detached, almost clinical way, like observing subjects in a psychological experiment. They spent the next 90 minutes accessing the fake banking portals I'd created, using the passwords from my note. The sites look legitimate, with the same interfaces and security features as real banking websites. But they were elaborate facades I'd built with help from a programmer friend who owed me a favor. It's asking for a verification code, my father said, frowning at the screen. My mother pointed to my cell phone bill on the desk. Use her phone number. They usually send codes to your phone. He entered my number, and seconds later, the dummy system generated a fake authentication message to a burner phone I had set up. They input the code, gaining access to accounts showing combined balances of $430,000. This is it. My father breathed. This will fix everything. They initiated a transfer of the entire amount to my parents' joint account, an account number I recognized because I'd seen it on documents throughout my childhood. The system showed a processing animation, then a confirmation screen with a transaction number. "We did it," my mother said, but her voice held no triumph. "Should we leave a note?" My father hesitated.
No.
"We'll call her tomorrow evening when she's back. We'll explain everything then. She'll understand once we tell her about the potential foreclosure." "What if she doesn't understand?" "She will," he insisted. "Family comes first. Rebecca knows that." They carefully replaced everything as they'd found it, erased the browsing history on my computer, and left the apartment, locking the door behind them. From my hotel room in San Francisco, I watched the entire process, recording every moment. The money they thought they'd transferred was never real. The confirmation number they'd received would lead nowhere, but the evidence of their attempted theft was now documented irrefutably. Despite knowing this moment would come, despite planning for it meticulously, I felt a hollow sensation in my chest. Intellectual preparation couldn't completely shield me from the emotional reality. My parents had just stolen over $400,000 from me without a moment's genuine hesitation. Their justifications, family obligation, Sofia's needs, temporary borrowing, were transparent lies they told themselves to maintain their self-image as good parents. I closed my laptop and stared out at the San Francisco Bay, watching fog roll in from the Pacific. 3 years of suspicion had been confirmed in a single afternoon. The trap had worked perfectly. Now came the harder part, the confrontation. Sunday evening, I returned to Atlanta. My flight landed at 7:18 p.m., and I took a rideshare directly to my apartment. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it. My parents had been careful to leave no trace of their visit. If not for the security footage, there would be no evidence they'd been there at all. I unpacked methodically, then sat at my desk and opened my real laptop, not the decoy I'd left visible. For 2 hours, I reviewed the footage again, taking notes and preparing for what would come next. At precisely 9:30 p.m., I called my parents' home phone. "Hola," my mother answered, her voice casual. "Mommy, it's Rebecca." I worked to keep my voice panicked and unsteady. "Something terrible has happened." "Rebecca, ¿qué pasa? Are you okay?" Her concerns sounded genuine, which only amplified the hypocrisy. "My accounts, my investments, everything's gone. Over $400,000 just disappeared." A pause. Then, "Dios mío, are you sure? Could it be some kind of banking error?" "The transactions show a transfer to another account yesterday afternoon while I was in San Francisco." "Mommy, I've been robbed." Another pause, longer this time. I heard muffled voices, my mother covering the receiver to speak to my father. "Have you called the police?" she finally asked. "Not yet. I'm trying to understand what happened first. The bank's fraud department is closed until morning." I took a shaky breath. "I thought I should call you and Poppy. I don't know what to do." "Maybe you should come home for a few days," my mother suggested tentatively, "until this gets sorted out." "That's actually a good idea. I need to be around family right now." I emphasized the word, family, slightly. "I'll drive down tonight." "Tonight? It's already so late, Mija." "I'm too upset to sleep anyway. I'll be there in about 6 hours." Before she could protest further, I ended the call and began packing an overnight bag. Inside went a laptop containing all the evidence, a portable printer, and several USB drives with backup copies of everything. The 6-hour drive to Miami would give my parents time to panic, to contemplate their options, to perhaps convince themselves I couldn't possibly know it was them. The night was clear, Interstate 75 nearly empty. I drove with mechanical precision, my mind cycling through the confrontation scenarios I'd anticipated. By the time I pulled into my parents' circular driveway at 3:45 a.m., lights were still on in the living room. They'd been waiting up, as I'd expected. My mother opened the door before I could knock, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "Mija, come in, come in. Your father's in the living room." I entered the familiar space. Nothing had changed in the decor for years. My father stood awkwardly by the stone fireplace, hands in his pockets. "Rebecca, we were so worried when you called. Were you able to learn anything more about the transfer?" Actually, yes. I set my bag down carefully. I know exactly who did it. That's good, my mother said uncertainly. The police should be able to track them down then. No need for police. The culprits are in this room. The silence that followed was absolute. My father recovered first, his attorney instincts kicking in. Rebecca, you're upset, understandably so, but you need to be careful about making accusations. It's not an accusation when I have proof. I opened my laptop and turned it to face them. Yesterday at 2:43 p.m., you entered my apartment using the spare key. By 3:15, you were searching my office. By 4:20, you had transferred, or thought you had transferred, every dollar of my inheritance to your joint account. The security footage played silently, showing them moving through my apartment with purpose. Their faces on the screen drained of color as they watched themselves commit the theft in high-definition clarity. You were recording us?" my mother whispered.
No, Mommy.
I was protecting myself from theft. There's a significant difference. My father attempted a different approach. Rebecca, you don't understand. We're facing foreclosure because of Sofia's loans. We were desperate. Save it. I cut him off. I heard every word of your justifications on the video. Family comes first. She's always been the responsible one. She wouldn't want her sister to suffer. I mimicked his tone perfectly. Did it ever occur to you to actually ask me for help instead of stealing from me? We've asked before, my mother said defensively. You always refuse. I refuse to enable Sofia's irresponsibility. There's a difference between helping and perpetuating harmful patterns. I pulled out a stack of papers from my bag. But that's not even the point. The point is that you committed theft and fraud. We were going to tell you, my father insisted. We were going to call you tonight after you got back from San Francisco. Explain everything. After the money was already gone. After I couldn't stop you. I shook my head. Do you know what the penalty is for identity theft in Georgia? For unauthorized access of financial accounts? The penalties start at 5 years imprisonment and up to $250,000 in fines per incident. My father's legal training finally engaged. You can't prove intent. We have access to your apartment. You've given us passwords before. Not to these accounts. And the video captures your explicit statements of intent quite clearly. I turn up the volume on a segment where he specifically mentioned taking the money to solve Sofia's problems. As if summoned by the mention of her name, the front door opened and Sofia walked in. Her timing couldn't have been more perfect if I'd orchestrated it. What's going on? Mommy texted that Rebecca was coming over with some emergency. She looked around at our tense faces, designer handbag slung over her shoulder. What did I miss? Your parents stole $430,000 from me to bail you out of your latest failure, I said flatly. Sofia's expression cycled through confusion, shock, and then, most tellingly, calculation. $430,000? You had that much just sitting around, and you never offered to help when my career was struggling? Her reaction confirmed everything. Not outrage at the theft, but outrage that I hadn't volunteered the money earlier. See? I gestured toward her. This is exactly the problem. None of you see anything wrong with taking what I've earned. Family helps family, my mother repeated her mantra weekly. Funny how that rule only applies when Sofia needs something. I turned back to my laptop. But here's what you don't know. What none of you know. I pulled up another screen, the back end of the fake banking system I created. My parents and Sofia stared at the screen, confusion slowly giving way to comprehension. What do you mean it doesn't exist? My father finally asked. I mean exactly that. The accounts you accessed were fake. The statements you found were fabricated. The banking portals were dummy sites I created specifically to track unauthorized access. I navigated through the system, showing the elaborate construction behind the facade. The $430,000 you thought you were stealing was never real. That's impossible, my father protested. We saw the transaction go through. We got a confirmation number. All part of the illusion. The money never moved because it never existed in the first place. I turned to face them directly. What does exist, is evidence of attempted theft, conspiracy, and fraud. My mother sank onto the leather sofa, her face ashen. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because I needed to know if you would actually steal from me given the opportunity. I needed to know if all my suspicions about how you view me, as nothing more than Sofia's backup plan, were true. I closed the laptop. And now I know. Sofia, ever the opportunist, jumped in. So there's no money? This was all some sick test.
No, Sofia.
There is money, just not in the accounts you tried to drain. I met her eyes steadily. I've been working and investing for 8 years. Did you really think I'd leave my entire net worth vulnerable to theft? This is insane, my father said, running a hand through his graying hair. You set us up, entrapped us. Entrapment is when someone is induced to commit a crime they wouldn't otherwise commit. I didn't force you to break into my financial accounts. I didn't compel you to transfer funds without permission. You did that all on your own. My voice remained steady. I simply created an opportunity and observed your choices. What are you going to do? My mother's voice was barely audible. Are you going to the police? The question hung in the air. This was the moment I'd played out in my mind countless times over the years of planning. That depends on what happens next. What do you want? My father asked, the attorney in him recognizing a negotiation. Money? We clearly don't have any to give you, Sofia added sarcastically. I want accountability. I want acknowledgement of what you've done. Not just yesterday, but throughout my life. I want you to admit that you've consistently prioritized Sofia's wants over my needs. That you've treated me as a resource rather than a daughter. That's not true, my mother protested feebly. It is true, and now I have irrefutable proof of just how true it is. I removed more documents from my bag, printouts of the video, screenshots, transcripts of their conversations in my apartment, and copies of the fake transfer confirmations. I've documented everything. If you can't acknowledge the truth, these go to the authorities. The reality of their situation finally seemed to dawn on them. My father's legal mind was undoubtedly calculating the potential consequences. Criminal charges, public humiliation, professional ruin. What exactly do you want us to do? He asked carefully. First, I want a written admission of what you did and why you did it. Second, I want you both to attend family therapy, real therapy, not just a couple of sessions for show. Third, I want financial transparency going forward. I need to know exactly what obligations you've committed to in Sofia's name. I turned to my sister. And you're the only one who doesn't seem to grasp the severity of what's happened. Your entitlement nearly sent our parents to prison. Sofia's expression darkened. So, this is my fault now? You're the one who set up this whole fake money scheme. No, the scheme revealed the truth. Your lifetime of having consequences absorbed by others created this situation. I faced her squarely. They stole for you, Sofia. They were willing to commit felonies because they've spent so long cleaning up your messes that they've normalized criminality. She spat. You've always been jealous that Mommy and Poppy love me more. The naked admission hung in the air. My mother gasped softly, but neither she nor my father contradicted her. Thank you for your honesty, at least, I said quietly. But you're wrong. I'm not jealous.
I'm grieving.
I'm grieving the parents I should have had and the sister who should have been my ally instead of my competitor. My father broke the silence that followed. What do you want from Sofia as part of this arrangement? Nothing. I want nothing from her because I expect nothing from her. My conditions apply to you and Mommy. What Sofia does is her business, as long as you stop enabling her at my expense. So that's it. Sofia's voice rose. You're cutting me off? Turning Mommy and Poppy against me with your lies and manipulations. I'm not doing anything except exposing the truth. What they choose to do with that truth is their decision. I turned back to my parents. So what will it be? Accountability or consequences? The calculation was visible on their faces, weighing decades of established patterns against the very real threat I now represented. My mother broke first. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't realize. I never thought about how it looked from your perspective. Carmen, my father warned. No, Miguel. She's right. My mother straightened her shoulders. We've always expected Rebecca to be the strong one, the one who didn't need us. It was easier that way because Sofia demanded so much attention. But that wasn't fair to her. This is ridiculous, Sofia interrupted. You're falling for her manipulation. My father remained silent, his attorney's caution battling with parental instinct. Finally, he spoke. What you did, setting this trap, was calculating and cold. Yes, I agreed simply. I learned calculation from watching you manage Sofia's crises my entire life. I learned coldness from years of emotional neglect. Something in my direct acknowledgement reached him. His shoulders slumped slightly. We did try to steal your money, he admitted quietly. We justified it a dozen different ways, but that's what it was. Theft. Sofia looked between our parents in disbelief. You're both going to cave to her demands? After everything you've done for me? After all the sacrifices? That's exactly the point, Sofia, my mother said tiredly. We've sacrificed Rebecca for you repeatedly. We just didn't let ourselves see it that way. Sofia's face contorted with rage. This is unbelievable. She sets up this elaborate scheme to make you look bad, and you're thanking her for it. She grabbed her purse from the floor. Call me when you remember who's actually been here for you all these years. The door slammed behind her with such force that the family photos on the wall rattled. One fell, the frame cracking as it hit the tile floor. Appropriately, it was a portrait of the four of us from my college graduation. In the silence that followed, something shifted. The family dynamic that had persisted for decades had finally fractured under the weight of undeniable truth. I'll draft the admission letter tonight, my father said quietly. And I'll research family therapists in the morning. My mother wiped her tears. Will you stay at least for tonight? I considered the question. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, to return to the life I'd built independent of their toxic patterns. But another part recognized this fragile moment of potential change. I'll stay, I said. But in the guest room, I need some space. As I carried my bag upstairs, I heard my mother's soft sobs and my father's murmured consolations. The confrontation had unfolded almost exactly as I'd anticipated, yet the emotional reality was far more complex than my planning had accounted for. The trap had worked perfectly, but the aftermath would require navigation I couldn't entirely predict. In the guest room, I sent a quick text to my closest friend Maya. It's done. They took the bait. Everything's changing. Her response came immediately. Are you okay? I stared at the question for a long moment. Not yet, I finally replied. But maybe someday. The weeks following the confrontation unfolded in a series of uncomfortable but necessary conversations. True to his word, my father drafted a comprehensive document detailing the attempted theft, their motivations, and a full acknowledgement of the pattern of favoritism that had characterized our family dynamic for decades. My mother added a handwritten letter expressing remorse that seemed genuine, if still tinged with confusion about how we'd reached this point. I returned to Atlanta after 3 days in Miami, needing distance to process everything. The family therapy sessions began the following weekend, my parents attending in person while I joined via video call. Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a family systems specialist with experience in financial abuse cases, guided our initial sessions with firm but compassionate expertise.